when he had to go to Medina to make the hijrah, did he just wake up in the morning and just said, give me my camel, let's go? No. He planned it ahead. He figured out the path. He got a guide. He had arrangements for people to bring supplies for him. He had Ali stay back in his house to make the Quraysh think that he was still there. He planned that whole process out. And when you look at the battles that he fought, whether Badr or Uhud, you see planning. He was planning all the time. Of course, sometimes the plans didn't work out. In the Battle of Badr, he planned to catch the caravan. But Allah had another plan. And he had to deal with the army of Quraysh. But he still planned for the caravan. In the case of Uhud, he planned for the Quraysh and he met them in battle. And his plans involved putting the archers on the hill to protect his flank. But again, the archers didn't obey him. So plans didn't work out exactly as he wished. But that didn't stop him from planning. So we know then that planning is from the Sunnah. And this was further emphasized by that well-known hadith in which Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is sitting with his companions and a man comes in the masjid to join them, one of his Sahaba. And before he could sit down, he remembered he left his camel outside and forgot to tie him up. And he was caught in between. What should I do here? Should I go back and tie him up? Or should I put my trust in Allah? Going back and tying him up is applying a plan. A plan to make sure the camel is there when he gets back out again. Trusting in Allah is saying leaving the planning to Allah. So he asked the Prophet ﷺ, in this case of doubt, what should I do? The Prophet ﷺ had said, اعقلها وتوكل. Tie the camel and then trust in Allah. And this is the reality of the Prophet ﷺ's life, that he would make those plans, but then he would trust in Allah. He put his trust ultimately in Allah. So, what is in front of us? To maximize our time, we must plan properly. Planning requires, first and foremost, setting goals. We have this time, our lifetime. If we are to plan to utilize this time which we have, this lifetime consisting of a few days, a few hours, then we must be clear as to what our goal is. If we're unclear about the goal, then how can we effectively utilize our time? We can't, because we don't know what the time was for. So setting the goal is the starting point. We have to clearly set our goals. And Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he gave us advice, clear advice about how do we set our goals so that we can maximize the time that we have. He said in a hadith narrated by Zayd ibn Thabit, من كانت الدنيا همه فرق الله عليه أمره وجعل فقره بين عينيه ولم يأته من الدنيا إلا ما كتب له. Whoever's greatest concern is this world, Allah will scatter his affairs, place poverty between his eyes, and nothing of this world will come to him except what was already written for him. That is the wrong plan. The wrong plan is to make this world our goal. To make this world our goal. That is the wrong plan. we will waste our lives. We will waste our energies. And we will not be able to answer those questions coming at us on the day of resurrection. As the Prophet ﷺ had said, if we make this life our goal, then Allah will scatter our affairs. He will not aid us. He will not aid us in successfully achieving the goals that we set in this life. If we make this life our goal, we will be constantly running around from pillar to post, here and there, helter-skelter, destabilized, ups and downs, distress, running to the psychiatrist, psychologists, counselors, will not find stability. So much time will be lost. Futile, a futile life. And in spite of all of our running around, and whatever we're able to accumulate, Allah will put between our eyes poverty. Meaning, all we will be able to see as we run around is in front of us poverty. No matter what we gather, no matter what riches we have, we will not find in it satisfaction. Though the media tells us happiness is having lots of money, houses, cars, vacation to the Caribbean, all of this image, these images that are pumped through the television, the newspapers, magazines, pumped at us. Happiness lies in the dunya. But it doesn't. That's not where it is. Because as we strive for the dunya, we will never find calm, peace. Our hearts will not find rest. That is why a few months ago, about 3 months ago, 4 months ago, there was an article in the newspaper about a German industrialist, 74 years old, who was the 47th richest man in the world according to the standards of the world. He had $14 billion. That was his sum total of his riches. $14 billion. 74 years old. When the financial crisis started in America and it hit Germany, he lost in one day $9 billion. In one day. He had spent so much of his life accumulating 14 billion, and in one day he lost 9 billion. Do you know what this man did? He killed himself. He committed suicide. 74 years old. Having worked all these years, he loses $9 billion and commits suicide. Of course, all of you realize that he has still how much in the bank? He still has $5 billion. $5 billion. And he takes his life. Because all he can see is the loss of the 9. It doesn't compute in his brain that you still have 5. That if you try to spend $1,000 every day, you would be dead and gone and you still hadn't even dented the 5. That's reality. But he couldn't see it. Because Allah had put poverty between his eyes. That is the reality. No satisfaction. On the other hand, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had said, وَمَنْ كَانَتِ الْآخِرَةُ نِيَّتَهُ جَمَعَ اللَّهُ لَهُ أَمْرَهُ وَجَعَلَ غِنَاهُ فِي قَلْبِهِ وَأَتَتْهُ الدُّنْيَا وَهِيَ رَاغِمَةٌ. But whoever has the next world as his intention, his focus, his goal is the next world, Allah will gather his affairs and place richness in his heart, and the world will come to him submissively. Where the goal is the akhirah, then Allah gives his heart contentment. Richness, as the Prophet ﷺ had said, لَيْسَ الْغِنَى مِنْ كَثْرَةُ الْعَرَضِ. True wealth, richness, is not from many having accumulated many commodities. لَكِنَّ الْغِنَى غِنَى النَّفْسِ. However, true wealth is wealth of the soul. أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنَّ الْقُلُوبِ. This is the wealth. To have in one's heart the remembrance of Allah, to be connected to Allah, so the heart finds rest. And Allah will gather his affairs. He can plan and implement his plan or her plan successfully. Allah will aid us in successfully utilizing our time, maximizing time management. We will be effective. When we look back at the scholars of the past and we wonder how many of them died at a relatively early age, because the length of people's lives were limited. In their 30s, early 40s, they died. But when you look at the works that they completed, you wonder how in the world could they have written all of this? People like Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn al-Qayyim and others, how could they have completed all of this? Imam al-Shafi'i and others. Ahmad ibn Hanbal gathering 40,000 hadiths. How? Where did they have the time? Today when we look at it, we say it's impossible. But Allah put barakah in their time. He blessed their time. And the world will come to us. Instead of us having to chase it, whatever we need will come as our need arises. That is the promise of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We don't have to focus on it. We focus on the akhirah, utilizing our time effectively. So, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he gave us this piece of guidance for effective planning. The second element which we have to consider in terms of planning to utilize our time effectively is that we must determine our prerequisites. What are the prerequisites to be able to achieve the goals that we have set? We set goals. The goal is the akhirah. What is the prerequisite? What do we need to achieve those goals? We have to identify them. Again, if we just have a goal in our mind, okay, this is a wonderful goal, but we haven't figured out what we need to do to get there, then what is the use of that goal? It means we're going to be doing many things which will not help us to get to that goal. They will not put us on the right path, so we'll still be wasting time and energy. So, if we have identified our goal as paradise, this is what it is. When we say the akhirah, we're talking about paradise, because akhirah also has hell. That's not the goal. Right? The goal is paradise. So if that is the goal in the next life, then we have to identify the prerequisites to achieve that goal. What are the prerequisites? What is the fundamental prerequisite? What is required that we must achieve, that we must utilize in order to get to paradise in the next life? What is it? One word. Huh? Salah, prayer. Tawheed. Still looking for one word. Taqwa. How about Islam? How about Islam, which sums it all up, right? Rather than the bits and pieces, the thing that we require, prerequisite, is Islam. That we must do Islam in order to achieve the Akhirah. In doing Islam, we must have taqwa. We must establish salah. But it's not just salah, we also have to fast. We have to do all of the things which Islam requires of us. In other words, all of our lives should be governed by Islam. It's to bring Islam completely into our lives. Most of us today are, as they say in the West, half-stepping. Half-stepping. Meaning we have one foot in Islam and we got one foot out. So we only made a half step. We haven't made a complete step. Whereas Allah tells us, "Udkhulu fi silmi kaffa." Enter into Islam completely. That's the Islam that is going to get us to that goal. That is the prerequisite, that we are completely in Islam. There's no aspect of our lives which is in fact outside of Islam. Meaning, practically speaking, that we must identify true Islam, which encompasses all our lives, and distinguish it from cultural Islam, which most Muslims today practice. Because cultural Islam, with its legacy, its baggage, will not carry us to paradise. Because it contains so much which is against true Islam. So for us to succeed, we must identify what in fact is true Islam. Otherwise, we're no different from Christians, Sikhs, Hindus and others who are following their cultural traditions. Inside of those cultural traditions, there are some truths. There are some truths. But it's not going to take them to paradise. Because the cultural traditions dominate, divert, and so people will not achieve the goal. So it is essential that we realize that the true prerequisite is Islam, which was brought by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The true Islam, the pure Islam, which is free from innovations and deviations. Sincere Islam. And that sincere Islam is, in fact, real submission, true submission to the will of Allah. It is known. True submission to Allah. And that submission is submission where? Where is that happening? It is happening first and foremost in the heart. This is where submission takes place, first and foremost. Externally, we might submit. We comply with the rules. But if we haven't submitted internally, will that external action take us to paradise? No. It must be fundamentally internal. Then that internal is transformed to the external. Now as children, of course, when we teach Islam, we teach them externals. Because to be able to grasp the internals at the early age, not so easy. As we try to keep them aware of Allah, relate things back to Allah, we're trying to develop a consciousness within them which links that external to the internal. But ultimately, we must understand that the Islam which is going to take us to the Akhirah, which will aid us in utilizing every minute of our day, is the one based on submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that submission